we're not going to be having a break. We're straight away getting into the next session. That is what Tulsi came and told me in my ear. So I'd ask all of you to continue sitting, and we'll have the next session starting straight away. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we go into our next session, I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Sanjay Kumar, Director, Center for Studies of Developing Societies. Mr. Kumar is also the Co-Director of Lokniti, a research program of the CSDS. He has been recently published an editing volume of the Indian Youth and Electoral Politics and Emerging Engagement. He has also published Changing Electoral Politics in Delhi, from Caste to Class. And with Mr. Praveen Rai has published Measuring Voting Behaviour in India. As an expert in survey research, he has directed various national and state level studies conducted by the CSDS, which include the National Election Studies in 1998, 1999, 2004, and very recently in 2009. Various rounds of biannual surveys, State of the Nation surveys, and various state level studies. Resonating with the theme for our event, the future is now, we as Indians are really at the emergence of a new legislative assembly that's coming in place. In 69 days, the entire country goes into voting a whole group of leaders who will lead India into the new future. We have Mr. Kumar here, who will share his experiences as how the Indian youth are emerging and how they are interacting with politics. Mr. Kumar, please welcome.
I have been speaking earlier at universities, seminars, but this is a very unusual group for me to speak. I know this is not a group from the university, neither from academics, a mix of all kinds of people. You had a wonderful presentation just half an hour back, 10 minutes back. What I would be doing, maybe I'm going to confuse you with lots of data because that is what we have. I work with this research institute called Center for the Study of Developing Societies. And we do a lot of research, and this is empirical research. We do a lot of surveys and try to put data, try to analyze data, bring out trends and practices, what is happening in the country. This is a conference on Indian youth. And what I'm going to present or say to you is about something about Indian youth. Two reasons for. So one is that this is a meet on the youth, and also if you follow the newspaper reports, if you look at the media, there's a lot of focus on the young voters, and there's a lot of talk about large number of young voters in India in this election. There are also reports which says, the party which won the last election, 2009 election, which was Congress, actually if you look at the entire vote share of Congress was 13.8 crores vote, and there are estimates that in this election, there are going to be about 15 crores young voters, first-time voters. And normally, there is a belief that these young voters are going to be very, very decisive in this election. I know young voters are in sizable number, but can they be decisive? Can they change the electoral outcome? My real answer is no. There is a lot of emphasis by all political parties on this young voters, and all political parties. Name any political party, if we want to name a couple, like Congress, BJP, Aam Aadmi Party, and even the regional parties, everybody is trying to mobilize the young voters in the hope that these young voters are going to be very, very decisive in this 2014 Lok Sabha elections. When I say no, they can't be decisive, they are not as important as political parties think in terms of electoral. Only political parties think because they look at in terms of numbers. But I say they are not as important as political parties believe. And why I say that? I have some evidences which I would like to present. And these are the evidences from our own studies over last 20, 30 years that the young voters do not vote like young. They vote on various other considerations rather than thinking themselves as a young voter. So that is what I'm going to present based on the data, based on the evidence. And that is why I say young voters are important. In a sense, they are sizable in number, but they can't be decisive in changing the electoral outcome in 2014. They have not been instrumental in changing the electoral pattern in the past. I would try and use 4 checklists. If I say about elections, how do we assess electoral participation? The 4 checklist is, one, we all talk about voting. If you vote, if some groups vote, we know that they are electorally active if you go and vote in the elections. Second checklist could be, even if you don't vote, but do you participate in election campaign? We know that election campaign, these are very, very vibrant, and some of the new party are trying to engage the youth in election campaign. So I would use that as a second checklist, whether youth participate in election campaigns or not. The third checklist could be, you may not vote, you may not participate in election campaign, but is there a trend of youth participation in social protest movements? And the last would be, even if you, though the 3 are actions, you actually, the youth act. You go to vote, you physically participate in protest movement, and you physically participate in campaign. So those are active participation. But even if you don't do that, do you support the ideas of political reforms? So these are the 4 checklists based on which I want to say that that we don't see a very, very active youth as a very, very active citizen who is participating in the electoral activities. And that is why I am saying that 2014, there is so much of noise about youth vote in 2014. There's a huge expectation that they would change the, they can make or mar the political outcome of the 2014 election. But that may not happen. We don't know the answer as yet. But my expectation is that we won't see very, very different trend compared to what we have seen in the past. And if we look at the past trend, first is about voting. There is a belief that young voters vote in, do young voters vote in big numbers or not? And this is a data for over a period of time. I looked at 4 or 5 national elections. These are Lok Sabha elections. Even if you don't read the data, but the basic findings is that if we look at the young voters are in sizable numbers, they have been in sizable numbers even in the past, but except for 1 Lok Sabha elections, they have never turned up to vote on big numbers. And the comparison, I'm comparing with the average voters. So if on the All India, if 60% people vote in the All India, among the youth voters, it is 55-54. So every election, at least beginning with 1996 till 2009, all the past 5 Lok Sabha elections, except 1, witnessed lower turnout among the young voters. I don't expect anything to change dramatically in 2014. Yes, there is more effort by political parties to mobilize the young voters. That might change the trend a little bit, but I don't expect young voters to be turning up to vote in much bigger numbers compared to what we have seen in the past. You may say, this is a data up till 2009, but the last assembly elections, at least in Delhi, because there was a lot of focus in Delhi because of the new party, Aam Aadmi Party. So you might say, oh, things have changed during last couple of years, because there was a big mobilization of the young people by Aam Aadmi Party, a new party which has a solid support base among the young voters. So things have changed during last couple of years. I would like to present the data for that as well. These are the assembly elections which were held recently, and there was so much of noise about Delhi that in Delhi, Aam Aadmi Party, a new party which actually formed the government after elections, got huge support among the young voters. But did the young voters turn out to vote in big numbers? At least the research indicates, even in a city like Delhi, the turnout among young voters was lower compared to the average turnout of all age groups of voters. And if you look at other states, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, so this is again consistent to the national trend which we have seen from 1996 till 2009. Even with huge mobilization of anti-corruption movement and the movement against various kinds of movement in which young voters, young people have got mobilized. So their participation in social movement, we see a trend of more participation, maybe upward trend. But when it comes to voting, even in a city like Delhi, where they were mobilized for various other social cause. But when it came to voting just 3-4 months back, 2 months back, they didn't turn up to vote in big numbers. So we don't even see an increasing turnout of young voters when it comes to voting, even as recent as 3-4 months back. Now moving on from checklist number 1 to checklist number 2, participation in campaign activities. Do we see young voters participating in campaign activities in much sizable numbers compared to the others? We tried to look at several kinds of activities where youths participate, and we figured out and we formed 2 kinds of voters who moderately participate in election campaign activities and youth who participate actively in election campaign activities. And if you look at the trend is almost flat. We don't see youth participating in much bigger number in election campaign activities since 1996 till 2009. There is some change in the last row. If you see, there's 17% youth who participated actively in election campaign. But these are the constituencies where a young candidate was contesting from a party ticket. There were 140 constituencies where either a young person got elected or he was a runner-up in 2009 election. In those constituencies, yes, there was slight higher participation of youth in election campaign activities. But besides that, we don't see youths participating in election campaign in much higher number compared to the past. So we don't see any trend that youths are participating more in election campaign activities. Again, you can say this is the data up till 2009, what's happening in the recent times. So again, the same data for the 4. These are the latest election. After this, there has been no elections. Now we are heading for 2014 election in a couple of months' time. Look at participation of youth in election campaign activities and look at what media does and what is the reality. These are estimates from the survey. There could be variation of a couple of percentage points, but it can't be absolutely wrong. I didn't tell you more about the surveys because of the lack of time, but look at the participation of youth in election campaign activities in the recent election. There was so much of limelight about Delhi, and in Delhi only 7% youth participated in election campaign activities actively, which is not higher compared to 2008. So it's all about, all the focus of the media in Delhi makes us feel, all the cameras in Delhi, all the big press in Delhi, and all the front page of the National Daily is splashed with news that now we have a youth which has changed attitudes. They are participating more in elections, and that is happening in Delhi. But if you look at the data, actually things are happening more in states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, where rural youth are participating more compared to the urban youth. So we don't see a trend of emerging engagement of youth in election campaign activities. That didn't happen even in a city like Delhi, even if a party which tried to mobilize lots and lots of youth in favor. So we don't see that happening even in a city like Delhi. Checklist number 3, participation in social movements, protest and demonstration. Do we see a change? And this is a comparison between 2005 and 2013. Yes, we see that in 2005, 12% youth indicated that they have participated in protest and demonstration, which went up to 20% in 2013. So we might feel very, very happy that there is a huge jump in youth participation in protest and demonstration. But there is no reason to be very, very happy, because if you look at the counterpart, this jump is even among the other age group of voters, which is the column on the other side, which was 14%, it has gone up to 22%. So yes, more youths participate in protest and demonstration, but it goes along with participation of voters of other age group in protest and demonstration. So even on this respect, we don't see any dramatic change happening with regard to, we don't see any attitudinal change or a change in trends of participation of the youth in protest and demonstration. Moving on to checklist number 4. Those were actions where you are required, where youth is required to come out and participate. But these are now ideas. Do we see any difference? In terms of ideas, these are all ideas of reforms that these should be done in order to make Indian electoral politics clean, in order to clean Indian politics. One of which has become an act now, right to reject. You can reject all the candidates if you don't want if you don't like any of the candidate. In terms of ideas, yes, lots and lots of youths are ready to buy the ideas of electoral reforms. So there is an excitement, there is an urge for clean politics. Right to recall, 69% said yes, they want a system where they should be allowed to reject all the candidates, right? To recall a candidate, recall their elected representative who has not performed. So in terms of ideas, yes, we see there is an engagement of the youth with regard to politics. They want clean politics. They are eager to have clean politics. But in the actions, for the last 15, 20 years, we haven't seen anything emerging in the action, any change in the action in terms of their participation in politics, protest movement, or election campaign. So what's the message? Do we see our youth different from others with regard to political participation? I don't see youth as a category which is very, very different when it comes to participation in politics if you compare it with youth with the other age group of voters. But there are some visible change. It's not that everything is depressing, nothing is happening, youth is not active, youth is not participating. At least some of the data from the other researchers indicates there is an increase in youth's interest in politics. Youth now take more interest in politics compared to the past. And when I say past, the reference is 1990s. So this is a period of 25 years. I'm not citing the data from 80s or 70s because I don't have evidences from that. But for the last 25 years, there is a clear trend of youth's interest in politics. Youths are becoming more interested in politics, though when it comes to action, when it comes to voting, they don't turn out to vote in much bigger numbers. Sizable number of youths are willing to make career in politics. It's not that you don't want to make career in politics. They don't, and those who don't want to make career in politics for different reasons. But still, there are sizable number of youths who would like to make a career in politics. So they're not averse to politics. They have great interest in politics, which is on the rise. Also, sizable number of youths want to join politics. They want to make career in politics. So we see that there is an engagement, there is a moving trend, that there is more engagement of youth in politics. Interest is on the rise, and we see willingness to join politics or willingness to take up politics as the career. What are the signs of hope? As I said, everything is not gloomy. Recent years have witnessed some change in youth participation also. We have seen that happening in terms of AAP, that there is now youth are more actively participating. More than that, politics has remained in the arena of the young men. Whatever is the level of participation, whether it is in the protest, demonstration, it was largely concentrated among young men. The big change is that young women are coming out to participate in politics more now compared to the past. And this also goes along with the women turnout nationally. If you look at all the elections held in this country from 1952 till the most recent 2009, women have voted in lesser number. Almost the women turnout has been, earlier it used to be 15-16% less. Suppose out of 100 men, if 50 voted, then out of 100 women, only 35 used to vote in the first couple of elections. The gap has been always wide. It has narrowed down in 2009, 2004. But the last couple of years, many elections have witnessed more women voting compared to men. And in states like Bihar, UP, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, there have been many elections in the last 2 years where women voters have outnumbered men, which is to say more women are coming out to vote. And this is happening even among the young women. So that's a good change, that it doesn't remain a domain of young men. Young women are actively getting involved in politics. They are turning out to vote in big numbers. Earlier, urban youth were more disenchanted with politics. Their participation was lesser compared to the rural youth. We see things changing even in the urban areas, more in small cities, less in the big towns, that even the urban youth are participating more in politics, whether it comes to voting or in other forms of electoral participation. So things have started changing, but not at the pace as we imagine or as we would have expected or as parties would have expected. So this entire thing, and why, to conclude, why do I say youth are in sizable number in 2004 elections. We know that they are in sizable number, but they can't be very, very decisive because they don't vote. They don't vote en bloc. They don't vote like caste blocks, as we keep hearing about, Muslim vote bank or XYZ. So they can't be decisive because they vote as the votes are as divided as the votes of the other age group of voters. So that's why they are in sizable number. Also, we see that their turnout is low. I think one big message for the political parties is that they need to try and mobilize the young voters so that they at least come out to vote. The difficulty is that political parties are not coming out with programs and policies to help youth engage with their problems like unemployment, education. Rather, what the strategy of the political party, even in 2014 election, is that give tickets to more young people. All the political parties, at least the 3 or 4 or 5 important national parties, there is a race among them to give ticket to more young people, and they are thinking that only if you give tickets to more young people, young voters will get mobilized and vote in favor of the party. I don't think that is going to work. You have to come out with programs and policies specifically aimed at youths if you want to mobilize the youth. I would stop here and welcome questions. Thank you.
Wow. In many ways, it was like a tight slap on the face, right? We think that we are energetic. We think we are people who matter. But when it comes to deciding the future of our country, we actually heard the figures. We don't matter. Is this a situation we as young Indians want to be? Are these 4 points that Mr. Kumar spoke to us agenda points that we could take in and change it in some ways? What are the ways we as young Indians could, become more engaged participants in this entire democratic process?
No, one simple thing is that if we decide to go out to vote on the election day, the young people decide to vote that, okay, this is an election day, we have to go out to vote. That's one simple thing. If the young people engage in that activity, that I think that would be one good achievement, good beginning point.
Yeah.
So Sanjay, you said the vote of youth is not decisive, it is divisive. And then we don't vote en bloc as we have other caste-based votes which come en masse. So now if we have to drive en bloc votes, what would be the common denominator which would drive the youth per se collectively to vote and be responsible? Besides nationalism and patriotism, I don't see anything else. Just the national interest as a paramount decisive component. I don't see any other reason which could drive en masse vote for youth. If there is, I would like to know.
No, I'm not saying that youth should always vote en bloc and the caste vote. I'm saying that the difficulty with the political parties, they are looking at youth as a vote bank, which is not, they are not the vote bank. And if you want to mobilize youth for more active or participation in politics, whether it is voting or campaigning, you have to come out with some specific programs and policies. There are so many welfare programs, mainly aimed at, the different communities. I don't want to name the communities, but there are various programs and policies. Why can't political parties come up with, even in the manifesto, there's nothing about youth. You look at the programs and policy manifestos of the past several elections, there won't be anything specific about youth. So if political party want a meaningful engagement of the youth, they have to have a focus on youth as a group.
Is it possible in a very wide diaspora as we are in, and the very fact that we talk about welfare, it sounds to me as a dole, it sounds to me like a carrot. Do we need that, or we need a strong surge of nationalism which would make the youth responsible?
No, nationalism is there, but you need someone to mobilize. Either we know there are lots and lots of youth groups. It's not that there are no youth group. We know, but still we see that at least from the data, it clearly indicates that those groups have not been able to mobilize the youth to at least vote in sizable number. Leave aside, we don't want to tell youth which party to vote for, but at least to come out in sizable number to exercise their democratic right. If that is, even that minimum is done, I think a lot of problem would be resolved in that context.
Sanjay, sir, actually I have two questions. One is like, you mentioned that the youth don't participate actively in campaigns. The other is like, the participation in protests and demonstration is actually low among the youth. My question is that, like, should we dig a level deeper to the figures and see if it has anything to do with the unemployment figures? Whether, like, you know, the youth, in other words, the youth are, like, you know, simply busy in other activities to participate actively in campaigns or in protests and demonstrations. That is one question. The other thing is, like, you mentioned, like, even though we saw a lot of protests in Delhi, that didn't convert to words. My contest to that is that, you know, Delhi being like an education hub, and the people who are really participating in these protests could be the vote bank from different parts of India, and may not really reflect in the voter turnout in Delhi. So what are your thoughts on this?
See, if you look at the data carefully, what I was trying to say is that in spite of political parties trying to mobilize the youth, we don't see any upward trend, whether it is voting, whether it is participation in protest demonstration, whether it is participation in campaign activities. So, sorry. There's something wrong with regard to strategies of the political parties to mobilize youth. Whether it is high or low, we don't know, because if you say 10% of youth have participated in protest movement, high or low, we don't know unless until we compare it with other countries, whether it is higher than Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or UK or USA. But still we know that if it is more or less 9-10% over the years, which is to say that last few years have made no difference in terms of youth's participation in political activities.
I have a question. Have you factored social media and internet as one of the causes, or is it a cause?
No, in a city like Delhi, when the Delhi election took place, we tried to do this analysis first separately, whether being a young voter was more instrumental in being successful in Delhi, or social media. See, social media has a very, very limited impact. First, if you look at the big cities, yes, there are people who use social media actively, but going by the estimates, even in a city like Delhi, there would be only 7 or 8% people across all age group who use social media actively. So, in a country like India, where we have, you know, like huge rural population, large number of constituencies in the rural areas, there is a very, very limited role of social media in mobilizing voters to come out to vote. Also, we don't know how many people, what proportion of users of social media actually use it for getting news about politics. There are several other things for which social media is being used by the people. So we don't find any direct correlation that more use of social media might mean greater participation of the youth. It helps in getting information, it helps in dissemination of the information, but we don't see any direct correlation that more use of social media might result in greater participation of the youth in politics.
Can we take one last question, please?
Is your study carried on with the effectiveness of election commission programs on youth participation? Sorry? Is your study carried on about the effectiveness of youth participation on a reforms or a campaign programs, election commission role?
No, these are our independent studies. We have done our own studies. These are not sponsored by Election Commission. But yes, we did one study which Election Commission wanted us to do in the city like Delhi, to figure out which are the sections who are low on enrollment. In a sense, among them, there are less number of people are enrolled as the voter. Who are the people who have voted less in previous election, and what may be the reasons for their lower participation. So we have done this study for Election Commission.
My question is the Election Commission programs or a campaign programs conducted by Election Commission is effective?
Effective. Very little effect. I won't say that Otherwise, all the election commission would just launch this program and you have higher turnout of voters. But yes, the election commission for the last couple of years have started very detailed campaign about to mobilize voters, through media, through putting up hoardings, so that is helping in increasing voter turnout. But I don't think to an extent which election commission would have liked to see. But yes, there is an increase in that.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take a final question before we break.
Sir, this time I think nearly 48.6% women are going to vote, and you just mentioned that women, rural or city, they are voting more. Do you think it's a true figure, or do you think that'll make an impact this year in this election, with women being significantly higher in terms of voting power?
As I mentioned, that all last like 15 Lok Sabha elections has witnessed lower turnout among women and higher turnout among men. But there is a change in the recent years, last 2 years. Most of the assembly elections have witnessed higher turnout among women. If this happens in the 2014 Lok Sabha election, it might make an impact for parties which get sizable number of vote among women. Likely, like BJP and Congress, these national parties get more or less similar number of vote among men and women. But there are parties. Jayalalitha gets disproportionately high votes among women. Mamata Banerjee gets disproportionately high votes among women, but not Mayawati. Not all women leader gets more votes among the women.
Sir, I don't know whether it is more driven by the women leaders than it is driven by the policies even for women. I think if Jayalalitha is doing something for the common woman, obviously she's getting voted.
Obviously,
and so
it is not driven by
so it's
women
not
leaders.
driven by women leaders.
Because if it is driven by women leaders, then all women leaders should be getting, their party should be getting more votes among women, which is not happening nationally.
But
it is only for
I would totally support you, sir, when you say that youth needs more policy and more actions on those policies rather than just commitments.
Lip service like giving more tickets to women or more tickets to young voters is not a good strategy for political parties. It will not work.
If
you have to come out with programs
ex-CM
and
possibly
policies.
cannot sit, his daughter takes that seat, does not mean she's going to win on that. I don't think so. Thank you, sir.
We'd like to close with that note. Recognizing the fact that we might make a sizable chunk of the Indian demography, but when it comes to politics, when it comes to choosing the next assembly, we don't have that much of a say. But also recognizing the fact that being an active participant will make a difference in the long run. Also recognizing the fact that getting a lot of women into the electoral system, getting them to vote is also going to make a lot of difference. So let's take this as some of the learning points when we depart from here. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Thank you for your time and coming and speaking to all of us. Thank you, everyone.